Record. All right. I am here with Louise Potter today. She's the broker. Hi, Louise.
Hello, how are you?
Good. So she's the broker at EXP in Ohio. And we're going to talk about today discrimination and offers. Let me create some context for you, Louise. I feel like your head is about to spin.
So many different ways.
I know. And discrimination is not funny, so I do not mean to laugh. But it's like, it's very frustrating for me that I hear agents and I hear sellers say, well, we won't take an FHA or a VA offer. And it's like, why?
And that's a very valid question.
It's annoying.
It is annoying and it's wrong, quite frankly. FHA and VA are very viable forms of financing. And they're making assumptions about that buyer based on the type of financing that they have, not about the buyer themselves.
Right.
It is what makes me sad is when I hear an agent say, I tell my sellers, we're not taking FHA and VA. A, that's not your decision. And B, why? Do you understand the difference between FHA, VA, and conventional financing? And a lot of them don't.
I think that's the problem, right? Yeah. It's a lot of misconceptions. And I think while financial discrimination is not a protected class, which you can argue that, like, I imagine you can argue like lending, not accepting certain financing is financial discrimination. I think it can easily lead into other forms of discrimination that are protected classes.
Exactly. If you have a buyer who is from someplace else, so you've got a Hispanic buyer, or you've got, somebody from India or wherever, I mean, anybody, it could be anyone, I don't think they can buy a home. They're probably going to be
a single mom or a single dad or something like that. It can be anybody,
any of the protected classes. It can, it's not just based on, race and ethnicity. It is based on a whole number of things. But, when somebody looks at FHA or VA, are they thinking, oh, that person really can't buy a home, so that's why they're buying?
What I hear most often, the misconceptions are, yes, that person has no money, so they shouldn't even afford a home, whereas somebody with conventional has more money, which is not always true. Two, that they must have bad credit, which is also not always true. Or that, what's the other one I hear a lot? Like, it's more expensive for me as the seller to sell to them.
That was in the olden days. That was in the days when I was showing with horse and buggy.
On your dinosaur.
Exactly. I'm kind of Fred Flintstone-like. But, in those days, there were certain costs that a seller had to absorb for FHA as well as VA. And, so it was a little bit more expensive for a seller to take a government-backed loan. That most of that has gone away. I mean, there's very little that a buyer can't pay or can't be financed into costs. So a seller doesn't have to absorb that.
I think as a real estate agent, it's our job to educate ourselves and educate the sellers, right? And so
Absolutely.
I think we've talked about this before, as a tip, anytime you have a buyer, especially nowadays, we're competing with a lot of cash. So anytime you have a buyer, if you can get them all the way through the process, no matter the loan.
Absolutely. I mean, you should do that with every buyer. They should go all the way through underwriting, so that they're only subject to an appraisal.
Right.
So you are more competitive with cash. So that way, if you're FHA or VA or whatever, it doesn't matter. You're fully qualified to buy that home.
Right.
So, we're doing a disservice if we're waiting until they go into contract before we begin that process.
Exactly. A disservice to everyone. Yeah.
And that goes back to that buyer strategy session where you sit down and you talk about that, and then you get them in with the lender and you get the ball rolling.
You forgot the signed agreament for them to hire you.
Buyer agency agreement, of course, because you've reviewed all the documents and given them a copy of the contract to review. So if they have any questions.
And they've hired you to work for them.
Right.
Exactly.
I prove my value, but yes.
Exactly. Yeah. I just hear it so often that agents are saying, well, I have an FHA or a VA buyer, and they're just like never going to get a house. And it's frustrating that it's myths. This
Well,
stuff's
it's
not
so
even
frustrating. Yeah, it's so frustrating for that buyer. But if we as an agent enter into the thought process that, I have an FHA buyer, they're never going to be able to afford this house. Not cool.
No.
It's my job to figure out how to make them appealing, because that FHA buyer may have so many better terms in a contract than any cash or conventional buyer for
Maybe
that seller.
potentially, right?
Potentially it could be. So, you shouldn't, the only reason I could see for discounting FHA or VA would be condition of property.
Mhm.
But even that, you've got an FHA 203K.
Yeah.
I had an agent who came to me the other day and said, oh, this place is, it's a total rehab. So, I'm just going to put cash only in the MLS. I said, you're doing your seller a disservice because you haven't discussed it with them.
Right.
And B, there's options out there.
Right.
So don't limit those options by, not understanding what.
Yeah. And honestly,
available.
it's like, it's not our job to understand all the loan types, right? And to keep up with them. And so that's why it's important to have trusted lenders that you work with to educate yourself. So what I'm hearing on, tips for agents and even for sellers and buyers is, one, get yourself fully underwritten, no matter the loan type, like fully underwritten if you're borrowing money, so you can compete with cash.
Right.
Make sure that as the buyer agent, we're having the consultation and getting the consultation will partially include like, what are our loan types that are available to us? Let's reach out to the lender. Let's talk to them. Let's, do all the things so we understand all of our options and types of properties that we can look at. Right.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What areas do you want to be? All those things should be covered up front. Your value becomes, 100 times more important when you do those things than just going out and meeting somebody. All the problems I deal with.
You mean being a Pop-Tart? That's what I call
that'd be it. Yeah, that'd be a Pop-Tart. But
Pop-Tart.
The problems I deal with on a daily basis, many of them could be alleviated by doing that buyer strategy session.
Yeah.
Or counseling with their sellers, just taking the time to do that. And I know this is a really fast-paced world.
Yeah.
And it is a crazy, crazy market. And sometimes that's just not feasible. But I'm hoping you're having that discussion while you're walking through the house.
Right. Exactly.
Quite frankly. I mean, when I bought my house, I used FHA financing.
I mean, it's a good loan product. It's not a bad product. And the same with VA. Like, it's a good, and we're going to be talking to a lender about kind of how the VA loan came about and like what it really means. Cause I just think that people don't understand, but it's not, anyway, he told me it's not really zero down. They've paid it in through their service. And then on the back end, the down payment gets paid for, and the earnest money and stuff gets paid for. It's just like, it has to show zero like that.
It is a great financing for a veteran borrower. I mean, why wouldn't you utilize that?
Well, they've already paid for it by putting in their time. Right. It's insane. Yeah. So I think if there have been times where I had sellers that are sort of adamant about specific, not accepting specific loan types. And so I think that's an opportunity to educate them and get them on the phone with a lender to explain how it's changed, because I don't know about you, but I'm dealing with people that haven't sold a house in 20 years.
Right.
And so things changed.
Yeah. Things have changed a lot since those days. So, yes, they absolutely need to be educated. You should not be walking in there as an agent saying, well, we're not going to take this type or that type of financing. That's not your choice.
Well, and it actually doesn't actually make sense, right? So like, as the agent, our job is to help the seller reach their goals. For most of the time, the seller's goal is to get all of their terms and the price that they want. So if we're going to help them do that, we have to cast the widest net.
Right. So if you don't understand the financing yourself, though, you can't do that. So, when I first got in this business, I had a wonderful guy who was a lender who did classes that I attended. And, we talked about all the types of financing. He gave us all the details so you could talk on an educated, level
Right.
with a buyer or a seller.
Mhm.
But do you think I didn't get give him most of my business because
Right.
of, his level of competence and what he taught me? I still
Well, and he had a
used all the,
teacher's heart, you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, exactly. But if you don't understand, then go find a good local lender and sit down and talk to them.
Right. Exactly.
Pick their brain, learn about the product. You don't have to be the one qualifying them, and
Right.
you don't have to tell them what type to use, but at least understand the types of financing.
Exactly. Because there's so many and it's always changing.
And that's why we are not the ones to do that, because the expert should do it, and that should be the lender.
Yeah.
But we should have a working knowledge of it in order to be able to answer a question.
Well, and I think anytime we're limiting a certain, I mean, even though we're not intentionally discriminating, we are eliminating certain financing types. You have a much larger potential to be discriminating when you eliminate certain things for no real reason.
Absolutely, 100%.
So
And
stop it.
that's that hidden discrimination.
Yes.
That is, and it isn't that you actually did discriminate. It's
Yeah.
the perception that you did.
Right.
And that can get you in trouble.
Right.
That's what can send you to court over that.
Yeah.
You know,
And it's not even worth it because it's not even true.
Right.
Maybe.
It's not even true. It was just by your actions that you implied that you might be
Right.
discriminating. So
Right.
you got to be a little careful. I can't think of the term right now. It's escaping me, but there is a term for it that it is the implied discrimination, not even intentional. So,
Right. So
you got to think about those things. How does it look? Well, I had, I had a single woman, and I had a Hispanic person, and I had somebody from Alaska, but none of them could use conventional financing, so I really didn't want to spend the time working with them.
yeah.
Oops.
Okay. Yeah.
There's implications there.
Exactly.
So,
Well, Louise, if people have questions for you, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
They certainly can call me at 614-226-6981, or they can reach out by email at Louise, Louise.Potter@exprealty.net.
Perfect. And if they're at EXP, they can always reach you on the workplace chat too.
Always on the workplace chat. I'm on it all the
You're
time.
easy to get a hold of. All right, Louise, thanks for being on.
Jennifer, thank you.
Bye.